Okay, let's talk about technology and technological forces. We know that technological forces, we say that they cut both ways in terms of impact. What it means is that some sort of technological advance can put businesses out of business. Probably there aren't very many people in here that have a film-based camera, because digital photography just about put film-based cameras out of business. So that technological advance, it created a lot of opportunities, a lot of new product opportunities, but it did put some firms out of business. The effects of technology can be quite positive from the standpoint of creating new product opportunities and new ways of marketing. Take, for example, something like how we buy airline tickets. Did you know that it hadn't been that long ago that when you got an airline ticket, you actually got a piece of paper? And you got it from a retail storefront travel agent? Today we get our tickets online, don't we? We get e-tickets. Did that hurt the retail travel agent? Oh yeah, big time. Many of them are out of business. Most. There's a few around, but and particularly in bigger cities, but not very many. I want to show you a video that deals with a developing technology, and I want you to think about the effects it's going to have. They talk about a few of the effects toward the end of the video.
We don't know exactly when we're going to be able to buy autonomous cars, but we do know the opportunity is coming soon. The idea first appeared in the 1930s in a monthly sci-fi magazine called Air Wonder Stories, but it wasn't until the 1980s when Carnegie Mellon University's NavLab created the first self-sufficient and truly autonomous car. Bryce and I actually got to ride in one of NavLab's later public bus models in 1997, and trust me, having your bus driver stand up and walk to the back of the bus while you're tearing down the highway at 55 miles per hour is a surreal experience. Since those years, autonomous vehicles have come a long way, especially in the last 10 years. In 2008, the autonomous movement's biggest achievement came when a self-driving Volkswagen Passat was able to recognize a stop sign and apply the brakes on its own. 2 years later, in 2010, Google had built an entire fleet of autonomous cars and clocked a total of 140,000 miles on Californian roads, driving alongside other cars and pedestrians and obeying not just stop signs, but all traffic signals, including traffic lights. By 2012, that same fleet had covered 300,000 miles without a single accident. Google and VW aren't the only ones with their sights set on the self-driving market. Mercedes-Benz began testing autonomous driving in the 80s when NavLab was around, and recently revealed their luxury F015 concept model, equipped with internet-connected displays that can be controlled via eye tracking and hand gestures. Last year, a BMW drove itself down the Autobahn, Audi sent an autonomous vehicle up Pikes Peak, and at the Tokyo Auto Show in November, Toyota unveiled its Prius Avos, which is an acronym for Automatic Vehicle Operations System, which can be summoned by the rider remotely. Now, despite some legal, safety, and privacy obstacles standing in the way of companies bringing self-driving cars to market today, unknown questions like, can the system perform in a blizzard, or who is going to be legally responsible if the autonomous vehicle hits a pedestrian it didn't recognize? Automotive CEOs still think the autonomous car is inevitable as the technology advances. Google has said it wants its cars in the hands of consumers by 2017, and Tesla's Elon Musk wants passengers to, quote, get in, go to sleep, and wake up at your destination by 2019. By 2020, GM, Mercedes-Benz, Audi, Nissan, BMW, and Renault all expect to have at least semi-autonomous vehicles available for purchase. Jaguar is expected to release one in 2024, and Ford plans to enter the market by 2025. If these predictions go as planned, the world is going to be in a much different place by the time 2030 is here. 1.2 million people die in auto-related accidents every year in the world. In the US, 40% of the deaths involved alcohol. Now, computers don't get drunk or mess with their cell phones or get distracted, so expect auto-related deaths to approach zero as more autonomous cars hit the road. Not only is it going to be safe, but it's going to be fast. The average American spends 52 minutes commuting to work today, but not for long. Say bye-bye to stoplights and traffic signals and say hello to high speeds. The autonomous car of the future will be able to plot a direct course and communicate with the other cars on the road so that as many as possible can fit and keep the flow moving as quickly as possible. Autonomous cars are going to be accessible to the disabled, elderly, and young, which raises an interesting question. If the autonomous car is no longer a car but a computer, then do we need to regulate it as much as we do with the cars today? Will you need a license to ride in one? I doubt it. Our environment is definitely going to thank us. More efficient driving means less energy is burned into our atmosphere, which means less carbon dioxide, which means cleaner lungs, healthier humans, and a longer lifespan for our planet. In disaster relief situations, hurricanes, fires, tsunamis, an army of autonomous vehicles could be ready for rescue missions. Finally, people are going to be happier. Stressful hour-long commutes shackle human joy. It is going to be nice to get rid of them. Thanks for watching.
So give me just a minute. Just think, we will at some point not be teaching people how to drive. They won't need it. Technology's changed that, hasn't it? Just like we no longer, in many schools, are teaching people cursive. Some people today, some people your age, can't even read cursive today. Why? Changes in technology. So the only thing we had left to talk about regarding Chapter 3, the marketing environment forces, are the so-called sociocultural forces. And as you can see, it represents a broad variety of issues, doesn't it? We put them into 4 categories here, but these are really broad topics and broad areas that we believe to have an impact on marketing decisions. We're first of all going to talk about demographic factors, and in marketing we take a little bit of liberty when we talk about demographic factors because we include more about demographic characteristics than what you would find demographers looking at. Demographers usually look at the characteristics of populations such as growth rates or decline rates, infant mortality, the birth rate, and those kinds of things. Marketers include other topics as well, such as the distribution of income, the distribution of age, and a variety of other topics. So in marketing, we take quite a bit of liberty talking about demographic factors compared to what demographers would. And what we know is when we look at demographic factors, we know that in a population that certain things change over time, and sometimes to discover it, we have to look back a few years, or maybe more than just a few years, to compare how things are now compared to 10 years ago or 20 years ago. To give you an idea of some of the things that we look at, let's take a look at the outcome of some demographic changes that we noticed based upon the 2010 census. Notice that based upon the 2010 census, we saw changes in where our population is located. People are headed to the south to some degree in terms of how the population in the U.S. is distributed. Notice also that we have the so-called graying of the U.S., which basically means that we're making more old people than we're making new people, proportionally. Yeah, that if you look at the older age categories, those older age categories are growing at a faster proportional rate than new people. that certainly has an impact on a variety of product categories, doesn't it? Such as entertainment and travel and the auto industry and a variety of other industries. If we look at the area of intermarriage, I can remember when I was considerably younger that if there was a discussion of intermarriage, it meant that perhaps a Baptist was marrying a Presbyterian. But you know, it's different now to some degree, in that now we're talking about interracial marriages, or we're talking about marriages across ethnic groups. And those are on the increase, aren't they? And if we look at the change in the gender makeup of the workforce, if you went back 30 years, you would find that there weren't as many women in proportionally as men in the workforce. But that number, that proportion has become closer and closer to being equal. And in the 2010 census, it was almost 50-50, very close to that. And so, you know, we notice, you know, these are observations of demographic changes. These demographic changes have significant effects on markets, you know, the need for certain types of products. And, you know, clearly they affect, certainly they affect employment as well. If we look at diversity, we have had diversity a very long time. Diversity sometimes refers to the differences across racial groups or the differences across ethnic groups. It can also refer to the differences across age groups as well. We've had these differences a long time. However, what's different is that we are recognizing these differences and taking action to help cope with and deal with these differences. And so there's certainly a greater awareness of these differences and actions being taken to deal with these differences. If we look at cultural values refer to broad beliefs and practices within a culture. And we, again, have to look back at times to recognize some of these changes. An example of a cultural value would be how we value marriage. We know that that's been changing significantly over the last couple of decades. For example, today, a lot more people live together and they're not married. That is a more common practice. That was an unacceptable practice if you go back 30 years or so. But it's fairly widely accepted today. And it's not just with young people. I mean, if we look at people in my age category, that same trend exists, where there are a number of older people that live together that are not married. So it's not just among young people that is occurring. If we look at the cultural value associated with divorce, looking back perhaps 40 years ago, there were a lot of people that stayed married even though they were unhappy because they did not want to be divorced. 40 years ago, being divorced had a fairly strong stigma about it. It was, you know, it was something that was viewed as negative to be someone that was divorced. And so a number of couples stayed together, and they stayed unhappily married because of that social stigma that existed about divorce. Today, we don't have that social stigma. The cultural value on that is that people need to be happily married, and if they're not happily married, they're not forced to stay together and continue to be unhappily married. I mean, it's a difficult situation. I'm not trying to say that it's a good thing by any means, but in terms of how it's viewed by society as a cultural value, it's different today than it was 40 years ago. So those are some examples of some changes in cultural values that relate to marriage. If we look at consumer issues, here we're talking specifically about efforts that are made by individuals and organizations to help consumers be better informed, to help them to have safer products. And sometimes these people are known, or organizations are known, as consumer advocates. They take action to try to help consumers, to help protect consumers, and to help consumers be better informed and to have safer products. In some cases, the advocates are individuals. A well-known consumer advocate is a person whose name is Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader was trained as a lawyer, and early in his career, he became an individual consumer advocate. He tried to work with or deal with companies in a way so that they would produce products that are safer for people. And he spent his entire career as an individual consumer advocate, and he took on major corporations to get them to provide products that were safer. There are also organizations that are that work in the area of consumer advocacy to try to have consumers, to try to create situations where consumers are better informed and they're getting safer products. One example of an organization that is a consumer advocate is the Good Housekeeping magazine. They have a program where they actually test products that are advertised in their magazine, and this program is known as the Good Housekeeping Seal. It used to be known as the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval. I want you to look at this video and consider how this organization goes about helping to protect consumers and how they act as a consumer advocate.
Firmex, this whole system is about firming the skin.
Peter Thomas Roth had been on QVC selling his anti-aging skin products before, with so-so results.
Look how nice that is.
Okay.
It's velvety soft.
But then 2 months ago, he hit the jackpot.
On January 28th, we sold $2.2 million of retail on QVC, and we had a wait list.
What changed? Listen.
All 3 of these products have received the Good Housekeeping Seal.
And see that little sticker going on every box? Roth has no doubt that earning the Good Housekeeping Seal made all the difference.
Having this nice little seal on it sealed the deal.
Far from being some stodgy relic of your mother or grandmother's era, Good Housekeeping means business.
This is the Good Housekeeping Seal in its current incarnation.
Rosemary Ellis is editor-in-chief.
So is this the whole
These are
progression?
from 1909 all the way down. You can see various incarnations.
The seal is that old. The magazine was founded in 1885.
This is one of the early issues of the magazine from 1887. And you open it up and it says, I love this. Conducted in the interest of the higher life of the household.
But feminists, before you sneer, consider what that involved.
We were pushing very vocally and helped really push through the passage of the Pure Food and Drug Act in 1905.
If you've never thought of good housekeeping as controversial, radical even, think again.
We stopped taking cigarette ads in 1952, 12 years before the Surgeon General's report came out, because research was coming out of Europe that very clearly linked cigarette smoking to cancer, and we didn't want that in the magazine.
Welcome to the Good Housekeeping Wall of Shame.
Products that we called out in the magazine for being dangerous or deceptive, like this kid's Halloween costume. They're supposed to be flame retardant. This one went up in flames in 1.7 seconds.
The magazine's world-famous research labs are the result of its history of activism. No product is advertised between its covers without being tested thoroughly. If a product with the seal turns out to be defective, Good Housekeeping, not the manufacturer, will replace it or refund your money. Good Housekeeping evaluates just about anything anybody, but especially women, might consider buying, from blenders to bathing suits.
Slimming swimsuits, as a matter of fact.
Is there such a thing as a real slimming bathing suit?
There is. We're in the process now of evaluating just how well they slim.
The durability of a product, or its effectiveness, is studied scientifically.
I want you to center yourself in the image.
Good Housekeeping also tests food, which brings us, or rather brought me,
There you go.
Thank you.
to frozen waffles.
Does this taste buttery? Is it crispy? Is it gummy? Is it wet?
My half-hearted preference?
I think X, because even though it tastes a little underdone, I did like the kind of whole wheat aspect of it, but I wasn't thrilled with any of them.
Fair enough.
Good Housekeeping estimates that 21 million people read each issue. With other magazines folding, it's thrived by understanding what successive generations of women care about. In 2009, when the seal turned 100, the magazine introduced its new green seal. Benjamin Moore paints applied for its environmentally friendly Natura line. Benjamin Moore executive Carl Minshew was thrilled when the paint qualified.
I'm not like a big reader of the magazine, but I knew Good Housekeeping, and it stood for something in my mind.
Something as old-fashioned as the commodity Good Housekeeping has successfully marketed for 128 years. Trust.
Okay, so this is an example of an organization that is a consumer advocate, and it's attempting to provide information so that consumers are better informed. It particularly is concerned about products that advertise in the Good Housekeeping magazine, and it's been doing that since 1909.